This hour, we're staying in Ogun State, where a petrol tanker explosion has claimed 2 lives in the Iluawela area of Lagos-Abeokuta Expressway. The incident happened in the early hours of today. The victims were reportedly burnt beyond recognition when a tanker laden with petrol caught fire in an accident involving 5 persons. Spokesperson of the Federal Road Safety Corps in the state, Florence Okwe, said the incident happened around 1:30 a.m. and 12 vehicles were affected by the explosion. She added that 3 persons who were seriously injured have been taken to a general hospital, while the remains of the victims have been evacuated. Ms. Okwe said officials of the Corps, Fire Service and other sister organizations have cordoned off the area to prevent another crash. Now to a bit of good news. All kidnapped passengers of the Kaduna-bound train attacked by terrorists on the 28th of March have regained their freedom. The latest among them are 23 passengers who had spent at least 7 months in captivity. A 7-man defense team assembled by the Chief of Defense Staff secured their release. Our correspondent, Lupiason, reports.
3 remaining AK-9 train passengers held hostage by terrorists have regained their freedom more than 6 months after their kidnap. The Secretary of the Chief of Defense Staff Action Committee, Usman Yusuf, said they were freed at about 4 p.m. on Wednesday. According to him, a 7-man presidential committee assembled by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabo, have taken custody of all of them. 28th of March 2022 is a day over 300 passengers on board the AK-9 Kaduna-bound train will never forget soon. They were ambushed by terrorists suspected to be members of the Ansar and Boko Haram insurgents. Survivors say lights in the AK-9 train went off, and what followed was the sound of gunshots everywhere. Government officials later confirmed that 8 people died, 26 others were injured, while over 60 passengers were feared kidnapped. Senior government and security officials immediately visited the scene of the attack, making promises of efforts to rescue kidnapped persons. Train services along the Kaduna-Abuja route were immediately suspended by the NRC. But while families of the slain victims mourned their losses, those of injured persons were in hospitals, watching over their loved ones with severe injuries. A group of others were left absolutely lost and confused, those whose relatives were kidnapped. Series of protests were held in Kaduna and Abuja, demanding for the release of those kidnapped and the sack of the transport minister. Series of videos were also released by the terrorists, who were seen to be torturing hostages in a bid to get ransom from their relatives and the attention of the government. The terrorists had also demanded for a hostage swap with their children and cohorts who they claim were in government's custody. It's unclear if that was done, but the first batch of 11 hostages were immediately freed shortly after. Some relatives of freed victims say they paid up to 100 million naira as ransom before their loved ones regained freedom. Mahmoud, the media aide to Sheikh Gumi, played a vital role in the release of several others. He was in September arrested by the DSS in Cairo and repatriated back to Nigeria for questioning. The military have recently intensified operations against terrorists in Kaduna and other northwest states, destroying several camps. The presidency has also promised an end to insecurity before the end of their administration. It remains to be seen how this will be done. Lupe Asom, TVC News, Kaduna.
Security expert Dennis Amakri joins me on the news to discuss the release of the remaining victims of the ill-fated Kaduna-bound train. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Amakri. Well, the news has made a lot of Nigerians, especially the families of the victims, very happy to have received this news. But how do you think the 7-man presidential committee were able to achieve this?
We thank God that finally all the hostages have been released. But you see, it is like better late than never, because this is what we would have done in the early stages of this kidnap situation. We do not put in all the necessary procedures in place, because this negotiation team should have been there right from the word go. And then, of course, the response team would have put in place, so that if we follow all the procedures of hostage kidnapping and release, this should have been done way back. But thank God that they've been released.
Well, many critics of the government and indeed its agencies, they have actually doubted the capacity of the military, saying they are not sure whether the military can deliver in its duties. But then, what do you think this has? Do you think this feat has actually put paid put paid to the naysayers who believe that the military may not be living up to expectations? And it does appear that there is seeming there's a sort of seeming peace being restored back to the nation. Do you think so?
I think one thing we have to be very clear about in this is a non-kinetic release. It is not a military operation, although it was carried out by the Chief of Defense Staff Action Committee, which is, I think, a negotiation team. But in situations like this, you have to mix the kinetic and the non-kinetic, and the non-kinetic is the negotiation part of it. Some countries will say we don't want to negotiate with terrorists, but you do negotiate. What we're against is the payment of ransom. And then, of course, we don't know if ransom was paid, but all the same, the whole objective is to make sure that the hostages are released.
Well, 6 months and a week is not a child's play of days, to spend in the hands of terrorists, especially in that den, looking at the climate as we talk, rain, sun, and even the threats they must have been faced with while they were in captivity. What kind of treatment would you rather suggest the authority, render them?
For these people, they need to go through a serious rehabilitation. They have to be in the hospital by now, and of course be checked because they've gone through a lot in very adverse conditions. So we hope that they'll be taken care of medically. And then, of course, most of them have lost their livelihood. And I think the government can do something about that. You see, that's why we're saying that if you follow the procedures of kidnap and release, kidnap, ransom taking or whatever, if you follow the normal procedure, even their family members would have been taken care of by now, because when this kind of thing happened, it's very traumatic. It's very, very traumatic. And of course, we hope that they will go ahead and do the needful.
Security expert Dennis Amakri, thank you so much for your insights this time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And President Muhammad Buhari is in Afaka, Kaduna State, for the passing out parade and commissioning ceremony of cadets of regular course 6 to 9 of the Nigerian Defense Academy. The president, who is the reviewing officer, arrived at the venue at 10:40 a.m. and inspected a quarter guard at the NDA main gate. He also inspected more than 300 cadets on parade. Other special guests at the event include the President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, service chiefs, governors, ministers, serving and retired senior military officers. The cadets have undergone at least 5 years of rigorous academic and regimental military training and are now set to be posted out as junior officers. The cadets of 6 to 9 regular corps are the first in the history of the NDA to be trained using the reviewed curriculum, which includes counterterrorism and counterinsurgency. It is hoped that this will further strengthen the armed forces as they intensify offensive campaigns against enemies of peace. Let's go to Delta State, where the police have arrested 16 persons in connection to the violent protest over alleged harassment by personnel of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Ughelli. The protest led to the death of one person, while others were injured. There is more in this report.
Calm has returned to Ughelli after the Tuesday protest by youths who were unhappy over the alleged harassment and arrest by personnel of the EFCC. The Commissioner of Police is here to ascertain the level of damage caused during the protest, which lasted for hours, halting vehicular movement along the busy East-West Road.
The policemen were very, very professional, I must say, in handling the situation. And that is why you could see that despite the high-level provocation, there's little or no casualty. because from the report gathered so far, it was the youth themselves that came out with all mannerisms of weapons, some brandishing AK-47 in their midst, some carrying pump action, some carrying petrol bombs, like the vehicles you are seeing, the damaged vehicles you are seeing.
The Delta State government is not pleased with what happened, which led to the death and destruction of property. Commissioner for Information says a thorough investigation will be done.
We have been able to receive some information as to the fact that the anti-corruption agency swooping on some persons, and there was an attempt to resist. Whether we like it or not, the EFCC is a creation of the Nigerian law. We want to believe that the EFCC is free to operate in any part of the country. We also believe that the EFCC knows that even in operating, that they must also operate within the confines of the law, as defined by the law setting them up. And that is why we are saying that a thorough investigation will be carried out.
Ughelli is infamously known for where the NSAS protests sparked off in 2020, and now this incident of youths who were allegedly questioned and arrested by the anti-graft agency over alleged internet fraud. Ikenna Amechi, TVC News, Ughelli, Delta State.
Some young persons in their numbers have protested what they described as incessant illegal arrest by officers of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. The protesters who took their agitation to the main entrance of the State Secretariat in Agodi, Ibadan, carried placards of various inscriptions asking the government to end EFCC. One of the protesters, who identified himself as Samuel, said they are agitating against indiscriminate arrest by the EFCC, who many times labeled them fraudsters. Mr. Samuel, who said he is an engineer and a real estate broker, alleged he has been harassed by officers of the EFCC. The protest led to the gridlock around the Secretariat area.
We are not saying that should not work. They should work for at least. They should work perfectly. Not burst people with one room, self-contained. If I have money, will I be staying in a room or self-contained? Who doesn't like a lit life? I don't have a car. Here they will still burst you. Why? We can't sleep. Why come to our house? Bring your staff balance. We don't even know the real. We don't know the fake. We can't challenge them. We can't talk. They will beat you. They will tell you not to talk. Why? What can you talk?